Hello, I'm Laurence Rose. I'm an author of books that explore nature, conservation and culture. That's as one subject, not three different ones. I'm going to read from my book Framing Nature, which has the subtitle Conservation and Culture. It's a collection of 12 essays, the first 9 of which are stories or portraits of different species. And then there are 3 essays in which I try to make sense of our relationship with nature as a whole, based on those 9 explorations of different species. Quite a lot of it was written around here in the woods and fields to the south of Huddersfield, where I live. And one reason for that is because I always write from a very personal perspective. I might explore the science or the cultural history of our relationship with the species or the conservation issues, but always I build around a direct personal observation or relationship or affection that I have for the subject. So 3 of the species that are depicted in those 9 chapters live their lives in the few acres that I can see from this spot, and 2 of them I mention in the first couple of pages of the introduction because they are a reminder of a simple truth, I think, that we are the newcomers in their world, and our failure to understand that, I think, is what leads to a lot of the problems that we face in our relationship with the natural world. So this is what I say in a couple of sentences in the introduction. Both the fox and the badger have adapted to the world we created around them and continue to adapt as we continually reconfigure it. We, on the other hand, struggle to adapt to worlds of our own making. And that thought is kind of threaded through these 9 stories and the 3 concluding essays. I'm a wildlife conservationist, so it would be very easy for me to write a book full of doom and gloom. But I wanted this to be a book about hope, and there's one species that really embodies hope for conservation, and I had to write about it, and that's the otter. So this is a species that we practically lost from the whole of England and most of Wales. It shrank to the coastal fringes of Scotland by about 1980, but now it's back. You can see it in every county. You can even find them in the centre of cities like Leeds, for example. So I write about that catastrophic decline and the reasons for it, and also the reasons why it appears to be coming back. But I also had to go and find some otters to write about, because, as I say, I always start from a very personal connection. So here I am in the Isle of Mull. The previous evening I'd seen a couple of otters very briefly, and I went back to the same spot on the shore at first light the next morning to wait in the hope that the otters might return. At 5:20 one did. It was suddenly there, about 150 yards offshore, swimming at the obsidian surface, left to right at a slow, calm pace, and leaving a silver-green wake behind it. It dived, reappeared 100 yards farther east, and after a minute or so had disappeared at the eastern shore, 800 yards distant. Between sightings, I watched the shifting of the loch's colours and luminosities. It was easy in the low-angled morning light to tune out the landscape and to see only abstract shapes and watch their evolution. I could concentrate on imagining the otter somewhere under the skin of the loch or out of sight among rocks. The wrack at the shore rose and fell and coiled with the breathing of the sea loch. Its colours blended and unblended, deep, oily bronze and sun-touched copper. The same colours, belonging to the dawn slopes of Ben Moor and its spruces, were faithfully rendered by the brittle surface of the loch, then lost to a silent shatter at the touch of each passing breeze. The soundtrack was deceptively innocent, a descending chromatic scale from a willow warbler, hooded crow with the coarse speech of a high tar smoker, a common sandpiper's pipe and trill. Somewhere the otter would be eddying and gyring, live streaming the final moments of an eel pout. A very different species now. I wanted to write about invertebrates because nature writing tends to give them a bit of a short shrift sometimes, and I'm just as guilty. It's also that I don't know that much about invertebrates compared with other species, so writing is a good opportunity for me to explore and to learn. And this species, the narrow-headed ant, is very little known. It's very rare, very threatened. But I wanted to write about the conservation efforts that were trying to save it from extinction, and this is in South Devon. Because I'm not an expert, I was with somebody who was, a colleague, John, who I was helping to survey colonies of the narrow-headed ant, and I was listening to him telling me random but very interesting facts about this species, and gradually tuning out of what he had to say and tuning in to the lives of the ants themselves. I squatted to watch the ants at closer quarters, half listening to John. Soon I was imagining myself a visitor in their Lilliput. Their hyper-crowded three-dimensional cities are something out of Blade Runner, chiaroscuro worlds that never sleep, whose architecture and its inhabitants are one and the same, where vast armies are genetically programmed to perform endless menial tasks for the common good. Control and command are everything, yet they emanate from an intangible nerve centre distributed throughout the Commonwealth. There will be ants climbing to the uppermost reaches of the nest to absorb solar energy at its undersurface and returning to transfer the heat of their own bodies through the labyrinth, a living hypercaust. Others ferry their sibling pupae through the writhing tangle of vegetation, detritus and co-workers, forever up and down between stories, constantly moving and regulating temperature in the brood. Field workers had already left the city for forage. A brief, narrow, slanting shaft of sunlight pierced the overcast of cloud that had kept the heath's colours muted all day. I imagined those first few seconds of increased warmth and enriched light and their effect on the micro-world beneath. Each few photons energise in a birch leaf the synthesis of vital sugars. It is an industrial complex. From point of manufacture, the sugar is transported under pressure in pipelines built into the tree's structure. Aphids tap the supply lines and siphon off a percentage. The ants tend the aphids, taking their own cut in the form of honeydew. In return, they protect the aphids from ladybirds and other predators. It's a time-proven system that relies on a perpetual stalemate between trust and menace. Replete, the ants return to their nests. Inside, at the heart of the citadel, resides the queen, the oldest and most venerated member of ant society. The colony will be organised around her needs alone, thousands of loyal subjects programmed to protect, feed and pamper her, their roles and responsibilities passed down through short-lived generations while she lives on for decades. One narrow-headed ant queen was known to have lived for 27 years, I could hear John saying. Thank you.